The Deepwater Horizon was a semi submersible floating drilling rig that was operating in the Gulf of Mexico. It was chartered by BP in March of 2008. In April of 2010, the Deepwater Horizon was drilling an exploratory well over 18,000 feet below sea level, about 41 miles off the coast of Louisiana. At about 7:45 p.m. on April 20th, high-pressure methane gas backed up into the drill, where it ignited and exploded. There were 11 workers never found and presumed to have died in the explosion. 94 crew members were rescued, and fortunately, only 17 of those rescued needed medical attention for injuries sustained. The Deepwater Horizon sank 2 days later. The exploding drill had caused an oil leak into the Gulf of Mexico. The oil flowed out for 87 days at a rate of between 1,000 and 5,000 barrels per day. The total estimate of oil that leaked into the Gulf was 4.9 million barrels, creating the greatest environmental disaster in United States history. The spill affected 68,000 square miles of ocean, which is comparable to the size of Oklahoma. Oil washed up on 125 miles of coastline from Louisiana to Florida. 3 years later, cleanup was still ongoing. Cleaning crews had cleared more than 4.6 million pounds of oiled material from Louisiana's coast alone. The cleanup efforts employed a variety of tactics to clean up the spill. The first strategy was to deploy containment booms around the perimeter of the spill in order to prevent the oil from spreading into the Mississippi Delta and from flowing into environmentally protected areas like mangroves, marshes, and areas where shrimp, crab, and oysters are farmed. In total, they used 13 million feet of temporary containment booms. By June, 2 months into the crisis, while oil was still flowing out of the hole in the earth, a marine biologist who was monitoring the cleanup reported that 70 to 80% of those containment booms were doing absolutely nothing at all. The Army Corps of Engineers pitched in to help, and they built 128 miles of sand berms to try to protect coastlines. By December, the $220 million project was determined to have helped only a minuscule amount. Bobby Jindal, the governor of Louisiana, he said that those sand berms were overwhelmingly expensive and underwhelmingly effective. The military sent 4 C-130 Hercules aircraft to spray an oil dispersant called Corexit to try to facilitate oil-digesting microbes to get rid of the oil. They sprayed over 1 million gallons of this chemical into the Gulf. Later, it was found that sea turtles and bluefin tuna experience genetic mutations and cancer because of this chemical deployed into the water. It was later determined that the use of Corexit added to the toxicity of the water, making the situation worse instead of better. Some environmental experts believe that the ultimate effects of this may not be known for decades. The most effective approaches to removing the oil from the water were controlled burns, offshore filtering, and using tankers to collect, process, and separate the oil from the water. The U.S. Coast Guard burned off 1,000 barrels of oil every single day for 7 straight months, removing 13 million gallons of oil from the water. But in the process, they released an untold amount of cancer-causing dioxins into the atmosphere. The EPA did 2 studies. They claimed that the pollution from the oil burning was minimal and very low risk. Hopefully they're right about that. Oil was collected by skimmers attached to 32 tankers that extracted 2,000 of barrels per day, and they separated the oil from the water. In total, they extracted 5 million gallons of oil that way. Some studies have shown that naturally occurring microbes have consumed some of the oil naturally. By 2014, BP claimed that the cleanup effort was complete. However, the U.S. Coast Guard responded by saying there was still a lot of work remaining. The Deepwater Horizon disaster created absolute chaos, and the attempt to clean up the mess was just as chaotic. This is often how things go in our own life. We make a mess of our life through our own sin, and in our pride, we attempt to clean it up on our own, only to make an even bigger mess. We tell a lie, and when people start asking questions, when things don't add up, we tell another lie and another lie until we become tangled up in the web we have spun. We cover up our deficiencies, we sweep our sin under the rug, we hide our addictions, and we do everything we can to not get found out. Our sin makes our lives chaotic, and oftentimes our attempts at fixing it are just as chaotic. But we serve a God who is the master of turning chaos into order. Now, that's what he has done from the very beginning, and that's what he did when he sent his son into this world. Jesus came into this world to redeem us from our chaotic mess. Jesus came to fix it. That's what redemption is. Redemption is fixing what has gone wrong. And that's what Jesus came to do. Now, we're starting a new sermon series that will lead us into Christmas called The Chaos of Christmas. If you could use one word to describe the Christmas season, a lot of times you would use the word chaos. Trying to cram everything into your calendar between Christmas shopping, family time, traveling, Christmas activities, baking and cooking, and trying to squeeze in enough time to watch a Hallmark movie or two. The Christmas season can be very chaotic. But that's just life in 2020, isn't it? This entire year has been chaotic. It seems that it has just been one crisis after another. And some may argue that the cleanup effort, so to speak, the efforts to resolve the pandemic, have created even more chaos. I was reading the other day about some negative effects of the lockdown prescriptions that our country has employed to try to slow the spread of the virus. One study found that the nursing homes have been hit particularly hard by this pandemic. Not only have 40% of the deaths from the virus been patients in nursing homes, but for every 2 deaths caused by the virus, another death has been caused by poor care over the past 8 months. Isolation has caused widespread depression among nursing home patients, leading them to not take care of themselves, and understaffing issues that have been caused by positive COVID tests and staff calling in sick. This has led to poor care. Failing grades for students are up 83% from last year. Among students with disabilities, failing grades are up 111%. And among ESL students, English as a second language students, failing grades are up 106%. According to the Brookings Institute, they are expecting a drop of 500,000 fewer births next year due to weaker job prospects this year. And they're projecting that a third of small businesses will be forced to close for good. The pandemic has made things chaotic, and the prescription to fix it has caused even more chaos. But maybe there could be one benefit to this pandemic. Maybe you experienced it somewhat over the Thanksgiving holiday. Maybe with restaurants being closed and no Christmas programs to attend, with smaller Christmas gatherings, no work Christmas parties to go to, fewer events, fewer parties, less traveling. Maybe this pandemic will force us to slow down over the next few weeks and really take time to reflect on the true meaning of Christmas. Most of the things that we usually do during Christmas time will probably be canceled. And so maybe, just maybe, we'll be able to put a little margin in our calendar and take time that we haven't had in years past. God often works in unexpected ways. Now, maybe the thing that has brought us so much chaos this year will be the thing that helps us to put a little more order into this season. Because that's what God does. He turns chaos into order. That's what he did in Genesis chapter 1. Now, if you have your Bibles, you can turn there. It's the very first page of the book, so it's easy to find. Genesis chapter 1. This is the creation account written down for us by Moses. Moses lived in ancient Egypt around 1500 BC. You may recall the story found in the book of Exodus, The people of Israel were enslaved by the Egyptians for 400 years. The Israelites were beginning to outnumber the Egyptians, and the Pharaoh became concerned that there would be a slave uprising that they would not be able to constrain. So he declared that all the baby boys born to the Israelites must be thrown into the Nile. But Moses' mother placed him in a basket and hid him in the reeds. Pharaoh's daughter went down to the Nile to bathe, and she found the baby boy and took him and raised him as her own. And so Moses was raised in the palace of Egypt. He had the best education available at that time. At Acts 7, in fact, Stephen gave a speech before the Sanhedrin and proclaimed that Moses was educated in all the wisdom of the Egyptians. He had a deep understanding of law and politics. This was evidenced by the books of Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, also other books that Moses wrote, books of the law. His ability to work out disputes among the people in the desert showcased his political acumen. The Jewish historian Josephus tells us that Moses was made a general in the army of Egypt, and that he led a victorious military campaign in Ethiopia. This and his ability to lead the Israelites out of Egypt showcased his leadership skills, his leadership ability. And the first two chapters of Genesis reveal Moses' familiarity with the two competing cosmologies of Egypt. The two origin stories of the universe that were popular in Egypt at that time. One was a story of the creator god Ptah, and another was a story of the creator god Atum. These were the two competing origin stories of how the universe came into being that were popular in Egypt at the time. The story of creation by the Egyptian god Ptah involved him creating the universe by divine word. Essentially, Ptah spoke and the universe came into being. The story of creation by the Egyptian god Atum involved him creating the world by fashioning it. But the story that Moses wrote down for us, the story of creation by the Hebrew god Yahweh, involved him creating the world by both divine word and by fashioning it. Now, Moses tells the story of creation twice, actually. He first tells the story of creation poetically in chapter 1, and he tells the story a second time by narrative in chapter 2. Now let's read the first part of chapter 1 together. Genesis chapter 1, starting in verse 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. Moses described a scene where only God existed. There was nothing else, only Him. He had existed for all eternity past. He had existed as a spirit. We know Him as a spirit who existed in three distinct persons. He was in perfect harmony with Himself. Yet He had a desire to create. God by nature is a creator. And so that's what He did. He created the heavens. Notice the heavens are plural. There are two heavens that Moses refers to. One heaven is the invisible universe, what we cannot see, what we typically call heaven, God's throne room. The other heaven, the second heaven, it's in the visible universe, the heaven that we can see. This is the heaven above us, outer space. And so these are the two heavens that God created, and He also created the earth. He created the heavens and the earth. He created this from nothing. In Latin, it's ex nihilo. He did not use any pre-existing materials. He created from nothing. From nothing, He created the earth. But there was chaos on the earth. It was formless and void. In Hebrew, it's tohu and bohu. Now you can hear this rhyming pattern. It's a poetic description of God's creation. Moses tells us that there was darkness over the deep or the abyss. This is terminology from Egyptian cosmology. The Egyptian gods did not create ex nihilo. They created using pre-existing materials. These pre-existing materials was a primordial cosmic ocean that the Egyptians called Nu. It was a watery, chaotic abyss where all life was derived. The ocean was a symbol of chaos. Now, if you've ever watched the show Deadliest Catch, one of my favorite shows, you can envision why the ocean is a symbol of chaos. Storms on the ocean, waves crashing in all around you was pure chaos. And Moses used this same terminology when he described Yahweh's creation. Yahweh's spirit was hovering over the deep. He was hovering over the chaos. This chaos was not pre-existing. Yahweh created it. But he didn't leave it in its chaotic state. He created it originally as chaos, but he was hovering over this chaos. Yahweh's presence, his calm presence. Yahweh was totally in control, hovering above this chaos. And he went about the work of putting this chaos into order by divine word. Now let's read, continuing in verse 3. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. God saw that the light was good, and he separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. And God said, "Let there be an expanse between the waters to separate the water from water." So God made the expanse and separated the water under the expanse from the water above it. And it was so. God called the expanse sky, and there was evening, and there was morning, the second day. And God said, "Let the water under the sky be gathered to one place, and let the dry ground appear." And it was so. God called the dry ground land, and the gathered waters he called seas. And God saw that it was good. God took the chaos on the earth and put it into order. He divided up the light from the darkness. He divided the waters below from the atmosphere above. He divided this by the horizon. He divided the waters of the sea from the dry ground on land. He turned chaos into order. And he did it with the power and authority of his divine word. Moses continued his first account of creation by describing how God created plants and the celestial bodies, the sun, the moon, and the stars. He created the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky and all the creatures that move along the ground. His poetic description moves along flowingly and rhythmically. Now, this was the rhythm. God said, and it was so, and God saw that it was good. God said, and it was so, and God saw that it was good. It flowed along rhythmically. But abruptly, there's a break in the rhythm. At verse 26, then God said, "Let us make man in our image, in our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air, over the livestock, over all the earth, and over all the creatures that move along the ground." God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. In Egypt, the Pharaoh was said to be made in the image of the god Horus. He had the right to rule because he was the embodiment of a god on earth. Moses, however, argued that Yahweh instilled his image into all people. All of mankind is made in the image of God, and all mankind has authority over the creation that God has made. Moses further explained what it means to have authority over God's creation. Now, he explained this in verse 28. God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air and over every living creature that moves on the ground." Now, this is typically referred to as the cultural mandate. What God has instructed here goes far beyond procreation. It does include procreation, but it is not simply a command to have babies and to fill up the earth with people. That's not all God is instructing us to do here. God has commissioned us to continue his work of turning chaos into order. God blesses us with so many things. He blesses us with a mind that we can use to learn knowledge and to gain skills. He blesses us with hands and a body to use to work and to craft things and to create things. He blesses us with a personality that we can use to interact with people. He blesses us with certain tastes, things we like, things we dislike, things we enjoy doing. He has blessed us with so many natural resources on this earth that we are able to use to create. And we're called to use the resources that we have been given on this earth to work and to create and to improve society and to improve quality of life. We are commissioned to work to bring everything under the will of God. We're called to influence society and to influence government to enact the will of God here on earth. We're called to be good stewards of these resources by influencing culture toward attitudes that reflect God's will. We're called to put things that are in chaos into order. That's essentially what work is. The law of entropy tells us that everything tends toward chaos. You may remember as a kid your parents telling you to clean your room. Some of you maybe have been neatniks, and so maybe it only took a few minutes. But most of us, we probably would look around our room, and what would we see? Total chaos, right? And then we would go about the work of putting our room into order. We would pick up clothes, we would throw away trash, we would put books on the shelf, put things away in the closet, we would make our bed. It was work to put it back into order. And when you were finally done, you have this feeling of accomplishment, right? God has instilled the desire to enjoy order within our heart. It's a wonderful feeling to be in a clean room, to be in a clean house, to have done a good job. But what would happen a week later, typically? Or maybe 2 days later for some of you, or in my son Landon's case, probably 20 minutes later. The room would be in chaos again, and once again you would have to put it back into order. No matter what job you have, you are putting chaos into order. If you work as a carpenter, for instance, you take a bunch of lumber that has very little value on its own, and you cut it, you hammer some nails into it in a certain way, you start framing a wall. And then you build another wall, and pretty soon you've put these pieces of lumber into order and framed an entire house. If you're in the medical field and a patient comes in sick, that's chaos. And you work to make them better. You turn chaos into order. If you're a teacher, every time you teach a child a lesson, you're turning the chaos of their ignorance of the subject into the order of their knowledge on the subject. The cultural mandate is for us to work to turn chaos into order in this world. And maybe you take a look around the world and you say, but there's just so much chaos going on. How could we ever put it into order? Well, there's no other figure in history that has had the level of cultural, historical, philosophical, and political impact that has improved life on this earth than Jesus Christ has. It has been followers of Jesus who have lived according to his teaching, who have done the work of turning chaos in this world into order over the last 2,000 years of human history. It has been the teachings of Jesus Christ that has influenced the moral fabric of our world, making life safer, happier, and easier for millions and millions of people. Yale historian Jaroslav Pelikan, he said this of Jesus and the impact of his followers, regardless of what anyone may personally think or believe about him. Jesus of Nazareth has been the dominant figure in the history of Western culture for almost 20 centuries. Some examples of how Jesus' impact has turned chaos into order in this world. Norwegian historian O.M. Bach wrote a study called When Children Became People, The Birth of Childhood in Early Christianity. in which he explained that in the ancient world, children were not considered very important. They were routinely left to die of exposure if they were born with any sort of defect or if they were simply born a female. They were often sold into slavery to pay for a family's debt. They were considered an inconvenience until they were able to contribute to the family by working in the fields or around the house. However, because Jesus taught that God cares deeply for children, his followers did too. They built orphanages, instituted the custom of children having godparents, and virtually ended the institutional marginalization of children. Years and years ago, life on this earth was just chaos for children. But in this world today, that chaos has largely been brought into order. In the ancient world, women were treated as property and institutionally marginalized as well. But Jesus gave dignity to women, and he treated them as equals to men. Because of the church's view of women based on Christ's teachings, women joined Christianity in droves. Life is so much better today for women because of Christians who have worked to turn chaos into order for women. Jesus never wrote a book, but his movement sparked a revolutionary interest in education and learning. His followers founded monasteries, and those monasteries became the cradle of education. They built libraries and universities and eventually the entire Western education system. They were all founded by followers of Jesus who were taught to love God with all of their mind. And so the chaos of ignorance in the world, illiteracy and things like that, that chaos was brought into order by Christ's followers. And Jesus' message of compassion was revolutionary. His followers expanded access to clinics and hospitals. They actually built a clinic or a hospital alongside every single newly built cathedral. They would build a cathedral, and then right next to it, they'd build a hospital. They would bring chaos into order by providing medical care for people. His message of humility was countercultural. His followers held it up as a virtue, while the rest of the world viewed it as a weakness. His message of the dignity of every person would lead to the decline of the power of the state. And there has been so many atrocities carried out by human governments, and that has gotten better over time because of turning chaos into order. Because of Jesus' message of human dignity, documents like the Magna Carta and the Declaration of Independence were written. Along with the words hearkening back to the very words of Moses in Genesis, that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The teachings of Jesus influenced the writings of John Locke and Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who influenced the political decisions of our founding fathers. The teachings of Jesus influenced the rise of humanism during the Renaissance. The teachings of Jesus influenced the political reforms of the Enlightenment. His teachings have led to the abolition of slavery, fair and equal hiring and pay policies, fair treatment of prisoners, women's suffrage, and a host of other social and political changes. Over the last 2,000 years, there has been no greater force that has turned chaos in this world into order than Christianity. And it has been followers of Jesus who have taken on the work of making this world a better place by taking up this cultural mandate in Genesis 1. As Christ's followers, it is our responsibility and our calling to take up this same mandate in our corner of the world, to work to make it better. Jesus gave his followers clear directions about how to do that. How do we, as Christ's followers, carry out this cultural mandate? He gave us clear instructions at Matthew 28 to make disciples of Jesus and to teach them to obey his commands. Help people put their faith in Jesus and help them to follow him. That's how we carry out this cultural mandate. Studies show that people are much more likely to be open to an invitation to church during Christmas. They're much more open to accepting Christ during Christmas. So I want to encourage each one of you over the next few weeks to be thinking about who you can invite to one of our Christmas services. Our Sunday morning Christmas service is on December 20th at our normal time of 11 o'clock, and our Christmas Eve candlelight service will be on December 24th at 6 p.m. Some people may be open to coming on a Sunday morning close to Christmas. Other people may be looking for a Christmas Eve service to go to. Maybe you can even invite them to both. But the work of turning chaos into order starts with leading people to Jesus. Because ultimately, it's only through him that the chaos in our life can be brought in order. He did the work of defeating sin once and for all, and defeating the chaos that comes from the sin in our life when he died on the cross and when he rose again. If there's chaos that's currently going on in your life, I want to encourage you to place your hope and your trust in Jesus Christ, and his peace will rest on you. There's no greater peace than knowing that your eternity is secured, and you can do that by placing your faith in him and being baptized. And if you've made a decision this morning to believe in Jesus and are interested in learning more about taking the next step of baptism, just visit our website, www.vinegrovecc.com, and contact us and let us know. Let's pray. And God, thank you so much for this opportunity we have to learn more about the way that you created this world, the way that you took chaos and you put it into order. I pray that you would fill us with your Spirit and empower us to carry on that work of turning chaos in this world to order. Help us to be wise and to be strong and bold and to know the best way to make life better here on earth. Help us to be creative and innovative and caring and compassionate and hardworking, because ultimately that is how we turn chaos into order. I pray that the work that we do would bring many, many people into a relationship with you, that many people would put their faith in you and to take on this same mandate. I pray this Christmas season that this church, Vine Grove Christian Church, would take on the mandate of trying to bring chaos into order here in our town, to lead people to you, to help them to know that that putting their faith in you is the best way for peace in their life, to rein in the chaos and to bring it into order. We thank you and we love you, and we thank you so much for your work on the cross that ended the chaos once and for all. And it's in your name I pray. Amen.